Welcome back to Turning Hard Times into Good Times. I'm your host, Jay Taylor, and I'm really pleased to have with me for the first time Claudio Grass. Claudio is a passionate advocate of free market thinking and libertarian philosophy. Following the teachings of the Austrian School of Economics, he is convinced that sound money, mainly gold, and human freedom are inextricably linked together. Being a critic of our current monetary and banking system, he was delighted to join Global Gold AG in Switzerland. As a managing director there, he is able to combine his passion with his work. Global Gold offers private and institutional clients a safe, convenient, and competitive Swiss solution for buying, selling, storing, and delivering a variety of physically allocated bullion coins and bars made of gold, silver, platinum, and palladium outside the banking system. He has traveled extensively and worked several years in different regions such as the Middle East and Eastern Europe. Claudio holds a commercial degree from the Zurich Business School and studied business economics at the European Economics Academy at St. Gallen in Switzerland. Welcome, Claudio. It's really good to have you with me.
Hey, same for me, Jay. Always nice talking to you.
Really good meeting up with you, talking to you as well. I tell our listeners that I met up with you in Midtown Manhattan about a year ago, I suppose, and really wanted to get you on the show before this. But what prompted me to give you a call today to talk to you sooner rather than later is the fact that we're expecting to have Ron Paul on our show next week. And I know one of the things that he really wants to talk about, that he's sort of excited about, is the Gold Initiative referendum that's coming up in Switzerland for a vote. When is this vote scheduled, Claudio? And if you could also tell us, just give us the highlights of what the Gold Initiative referendum is all about.
Okay. I mean, the people of Switzerland have to vote on the 30th of November if they want to, vote for the Gold Initiative.
Uh-huh.
And so the Gold Initiative, basically, the referendum contains the following points. First of all, that the balance sheet or the assets of the Swiss National Bank needs to be backed up by 20% of gold.
Uh-huh.
And at the moment, when we look at, the currency reserves, basically we're down to 7.8%. And so the goal would be to buy within the next 5 years up to 20%.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first point. The second point is that, all the gold of the Swiss SNB needs to be repatriated to Switzerland, because as per the official figures, we have 70% stored in Switzerland and 30% are stored outside of Switzerland. This means 20% is in England and 10% with the Central Bank of Canada.
Okay, so the referendum would require 100% of that 20% the Swiss bank has to hold be stored in Switzerland.
All the physical gold needs to be stored in Switzerland.
Uh-huh.
That's one of the points.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third point basically is that the Swiss National Bank is not to sell any gold in the future again. Okay. So in a kind, we would basically go, we would go back to, a higher gold backing, of course. I mean, it's just mentioning that they're not allowed to sell. Of course, you don't know exactly if it would be possible to lease and so on. But, at the end of the day, I think it's really a referendum which goes into the right direction. And of course, at the same time, it's really, it's addressing the right questions, and it also, brings back gold into the minds of a lot of Swiss people, which haven't thought about physical gold and what it means, what it means as hard money.
Sure.
So I think that's really a great initiative. Whatever is coming up at the end of the day.
Sure.
People are deciding.
Sure. Claudio, do we have any idea? Do you have a sense of how many ounces or how many tons that would amount to if the Swiss had to, if the referendum passes? How much gold would have to be sent to Switzerland from? How much gold the Swiss bank would have to own, more than that 7.8% coverage they have now? And then the second question is how much, in terms of tonnage, would need to be sent to Switzerland from England and Canada?
Okay, at the moment, the Swiss own officially 1,040 tons of gold.
Uh-huh.
So let's say, 70%, or roughly 750 tons should be stored in Switzerland, and the rest basically needs to be repatriated.
Mm-hmm.
And if they would go back, the 20% backing, at the moment, based on the actual balance sheet, that would mean that they would have to buy an additional 1,500 tons over the next 5 years.
Uh-huh. 1,500 tons over the next 5 years. I mean, Switzerland is a small country. What is the population of Switzerland, more or less, these days?
It's roughly 8 million people.
Yeah, okay. So on a per capita basis, what Switzerland has now is probably greater than most countries have.
I think we still have the highest, in terms of if you break it down, the physical gold reserves per capita, we have the highest amount, that's for sure. Yeah.
Still has the highest amount. So politically, there is a move to do this. How does it look? What's the possibility of this referendum passing in your judgment?
Well, first of all, we need to say that amongst the establishment, all the people in power, let's call, the bankers, the central bankers, the politicians, also, big business, basically these people, of course, they're all against gold backing because at the same time they also understand that they're losing grip and power. So what we were witnessing over here in Switzerland is that in the official channels, the official TV stations and radio stations and the newspapers, basically there's hardly any debate taking place. What does it mean, to go back to gold? What would be the outcome when we go back or not to go back? Mm-hmm. So they try to ignore it. And but we had two polls in the last 10 days. Mm-hmm. One from a newspaper, another one from the TV station, from the official Swiss TV station, and both came up with the same outcome. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing was that 45% of the Swiss people, which were part of that questionnaire, basically are pro gold initiative. 39% are against it, and I think the difference is 17%. So they still don't know what exactly to do. Mm-hmm. So that was extremely. Of course, it was a surprise, and at the same time, it just shows. I also had some talks with some politicians over here in Switzerland, and they were saying, the closer you go to the normal person, the more likely they love gold. Yeah. And the higher you go up, of course, in the establishment, the more the people opposed to gold. So, but this is, as I always said, Switzerland has a tradition, 800 years. We always had a decentralized, federalistic structure. We had the last remaining direct democracy. So, the Swiss people have these kind of values still in their genes. They don't trust centralized government that much. Mm-hmm. And I think this is just showing that, that the distrust amongst the Swiss people against a centralized government and even our government is growing. Mm-hmm.
Claudio, are you seeing a lot of propaganda from the mainstream media then trying to scare people into believing that terrible things will happen if you went back onto a gold standard? Are the Keynesians starting to spew their poison again?
Well, there is even not that much propaganda so far because I think the strategy has been we don't bring it up. I mean, when we went off the gold fixing, end of the 90s, there were also no discussion at all. And at the end, I think at the end of the day, I think 28 or 30% of the Swiss people went to the polls and they accepted the new constitution, which was sold as a kind of modernization of the old constitution, just changing the words and make it more up to date. Mm-hmm. But they were not talking about that they basically are going to cancel the 40% gold backing we had up to then. Mm-hmm. And so I think there has been they used the kind of same strategy, so they were not talking too much about it, and I think they are now definitely they are surprised to hear that you have bigger parts of the Swiss people basically going for the gold initiative, and so will be interesting to see if the propaganda will start in the next few weeks. Yeah. If the people are getting nervous or the establishment is getting nervous or not. Yeah. We don't know yet, but the next few weeks will show.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting. And so the date of the referendum again, Claudio, is when?
The 30th of November.
November 30th.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, certainly the world will. Well, those of us who are interested in gold will be watching. I suppose that most of the rest of the media here in the U.S. We're not hearing much about it. Certainly, they'll try to probably sweep it under the rug to the extent it's possible. The last thing they want is for people to think that anybody other than the uneducated, unsophisticated people would ever want to own gold. For goodness sakes, can't have Harvard, Princeton, Yale. I mean, if those guys don't want gold, if they say that it's a barbaric relic, then certainly it must be so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I mean, how could we? I mean, only really stupid people, uneducated people, should ever want gold as money. I mean, how? It's just so obvious, isn't it? Well, it certainly is here because the propaganda in America has been all throughout that gold is a barbaric relic, and anybody who is quote unquote educated in the system here knows very well that. That I mean, Switzerland. You Swiss people just couldn't be so stupid as to want to have gold as money again. I mean, that would be the way it would be. So, and if you were to vote on this referendum, the propaganda that would be spun here would be those poor Swiss people they need to be educated.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, even the Swiss people, they have to understand what does it means to have, monetary stability. I mean, they have to understand what it means to have a monetary system. So let's say when they, when we would go back to gold fixing, at the end of the day, most likely the Swiss franc is going to appreciate. I mean, no one knows exactly what will be the outcome, but of course, we had also, I mean, the balance sheet of the S&B, went end of the 90s, they were down to 50 billions, and now they're up to 500 billions.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there has been a lot of, inflation also imported into Switzerland. Of course, also, certain people, they understand now that when the central bank is printing money, that they are basically redistributing wealth.
Sure.
So they are in favor, of the export industry, and of course, the actual structures which are not sustainable. But of course, for a short period of time, when you print new money, I mean, then you can basically paper it over.
Yeah.
But it doesn't. I mean, in the long run, I mean, okay, that's what Keynes said. In the long run, all that. Yeah. But I think, I hope that the Swiss people realize that if the S&B goes further with the same policy, that we are just going to be impoverished. And but the consequences, to go back for a gold fixing means also that we would have a most likely correction. No one knows exactly what the future will bring, how deep the correction will be. So I think it's important to tell the Swiss people also what are the consequences.
In the short run, what you're saying is there would likely be a correction in the Swiss economy because the Swiss franc would get stronger.
Absolutely. I mean, this would mean real estate prices would most likely go down. We might have a problem in the banking system like UBS and Credit Suisse. Because, I mean, there has been so much debt in the past. So we have to pay the bill, especially the peoples which were using that to finance their business and were profiting from it. But on the other side, I mean, the average Swiss person, all the guys who are productive and receive, fixed salaries and so on, I mean, they have to understand that their money is growing in purchasing power. So even if they put some Swiss francs on the side today, they can be sure that in a few years' time, they will be able to buy more, that the currency is appreciating.
Right.
And I think, but most of the people don't understand that kind of combination, and I think that's why it's so important that we also tell the Swiss people, what is the outcome? I mean, that's why I always thought it's so disappointing that we don't have a debate, because, I mean, everything has a consequence. And when we look back into the past, whenever, when we had the gold fixing, the gold standard, in a way, I mean, whenever, we had the big depression, I mean, they always were saying, the gold was the mistake of the gold standard. And that's not true. It's really, we just printed too much money out of nothing,
sure.
Too much paper. And one fine day, people have to pay for it. But let's have, I really believe that the best would be for the Swiss economy and for the Swiss people in terms of liberty, pluralistic structure, staying independent, that we would go back to gold fixing and that we would accept, correction over 1-2 years. But then the people have to understand that we have to change, our economy, that we have to, bring down the taxes, that we have to reduce the political system, and that we need more people in production than in, living off tax money.
Well, that's right.
I think that's the whole combination. So,
yeah, that's the combination, and of course you've got to educate people, and of course people have been educated not to think and not to understand free market economics. Claudio, I think you. Yeah, I don't know, because I've been to Switzerland a few times, but I don't know if the Swiss people are as ignorant about free market economics as Americans are, but Americans certainly are totally clueless for the most part, except for the Austrian people, the Austrian school. I think. So the Swiss people as ignorant as Americans? You haven't spent time here either, but I can't imagine they are.
Well, I mean, the Swiss, they still have, I mean, they just, I think, they just realize that something is heading in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And, most of the people understand that at the end, even if the salaries are growing, they also understand, the average Swiss at least, that they can buy less and less.
Yeah.
And that taxation is rising and that everything is going up, especially when it comes to real estate and rentals and that kind of stuff. So I think they just, and at the same time, I mean, as I said, we have been raised in a decentralized system, so we never had a king, we never had, president.
Yes.
So the Swiss people, they don't trust that much central
government. Yeah.
Absolutely.
What do the Swiss people understand? Do they believe that you become wealthy by saving and working, or do they think you become wealthy by spending and not working? That's the Keynesian way, We've all been taught that.
I think a lot of Swiss people, they realize that you cannot just print money out of nothing and that you don't create wealth, out of the printing press.
Yeah.
And that's just, that's the feeling, or that's the kind of, how do you say? I mean, they understand that. They have that in their genes. So
I think that's what I was going to say. I think that especially, and I don't know if this is a fair statement or not to say, more so in the German-speaking part of Germany than in the French-speaking part. I probably am getting into trouble if I start talking like that. I don't know if politically correct or not, but the Germans certainly have this work ethic, I think, that is part of their genes. And I suppose the French do too. A good portion of the French community has as well. But really, this is going to be really fascinating to watch. And again, I wanted to talk to you about it because I know it's one of the things that Ron Paul wants to talk about when I have him on my show next week. And also, before I let you go, Claudio, could you possibly just give our listeners an overview of what you do and how they can follow your work?
Yeah, I mean, what we are doing basically, we buy physical metals on behalf of the client, and we store it outside of the banking system. The metals are always stored under the direct and unencumbered ownership of the client. And so global gold has been made because, it's a real harsh crisis scenario solution. Because we believe our big picture is, we don't know yet when it will, when the system is going to collapse. But I mean, we know that the long-term debt cycles and that the economy is working, it's working in cycles. And we believe we're really approaching the end of a long-term debt cycle. And so that's in the next few years. It's likely. I mean, it can happen at any time, basically, that the banks are going, bust. And
sure, unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah, and so that's what we are doing. And at the same time, we are publishing an outlook report, a quarterly outlook report, where we basically try to educate the people about, Austrian economics, and we do book summaries about old books, which also shows that. Governments, or the history, I mean, history always has been written by the winners.
Yeah, that's right.
Most of the time, it's really coming from one angle only.
Right.
And so we use a lot of books from the Mises Institute. I really like the Mises guys. And so we're doing, book summaries. We try to explain. We just did a video about the boom bust cycles, also a special report, always coming from an Austrian economics perspective. And then, of course, also, the big picture, what's going on in Switzerland, what's going on in the gold market, or in Europe in particular. And all these publications are for free. And you basically, people can subscribe on, and they will also find us under www.globalgold.ch. And would be fantastic, to have more people. I think that's also the good stuff about that referendum. I mean, the aim is really whatever will be the outcome. I mean, if we would go back to gold fixing, this will be a game changer because Switzerland is still, the financial hub on the global scale, and we are the last remaining direct democracies. I mean, Switzerland has a specific point on this planet, and if we go back, I mean, that would be that would be a strong sign, for other governments.
I think that's right. I think that's a hopeful sign, and I'm sure that's why Ron Paul is excited about what he sees going on there, because gold and sound money is certainly a precondition, I would argue, for a democratic system, for a system by the people and for the people, as opposed the aristocrats or the power mongers who are really trying to control the system. They're the ones that want to turn the lights off and not allow people to understand the significance of honest money. So I want to thank you very much, Claudio, for sharing with our listeners this information about the Gold Initiative, and I would really urge my listeners to go to globalgold.ch, CH for Switzerland, globalgold.ch. I've got that right, Claudio?
Yeah, correct. Absolutely.
Well, I really look forward to talking to you some more, and really should get you on my show from time to time as well, and perhaps have you on next week. We'll see how it works out with Ron Paul himself. That would be great. I know you met up with Ron recently. I believe you met up with Ron recently, I believe.
Absolutely, and we're also going to publish, I interviewed him a few weeks ago in Lake Jackson, and so the next Outlook report is coming, beginning of November, and there we are also going to publish the interview with Ron Paul. He is just, as I said, sound money for a sound society.
Absolutely. It's a precondition.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah, I agree. Well, that's why we really wanted to talk to you and find out about the Gold Initiative, and certainly we'll talk to you perhaps at least after the initiative. That's November 30th, if not before. So I want to thank you very much, Claudio, for spending some time with us today.
Thank you very much for having me, Jay.